Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us for another edition of Sri's Sunday New York Times Read Along. My name is Neil Parekh. I am the executive producer and guest host of Sri's Sunday New York Times Read Along. Our guest today for March 7th, 2021 is Sheryl McCarthy, host of City University of New York's one-to-one interview show. Our host, of course, is Sri Srinivasan, Marshall Loeb Professor at the Stony Brook School of Journalism and co-founder of Digimentors. We're live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Please let us know where you're watching from. Tag your friends, share, retweet if you're watching on Twitter. Remember, if you're watching on Facebook or Twitter, you need to press play on the video so that we would see your comments. Laura Silverman is watching from Philadelphia. Hello, Laura. How are you doing? My mom is watching from Hastings-on-Hudson. Hi, Mom. Good to see you. I promised to call you. Doug Levy is up early in California. Thank you, Doug. Always 5:30 a.m. Pacific time. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm not sure that I would be doing that myself, but Patricia Freudenberg joining us from New York, another loyal and consistent viewer. Miriam Berkeley from Hell's Kitchen in New York. And Aniz Bashir watching from Kerala, our first international viewer. Again, the Sri Sunday New York Times Read Along gets an international audience. We have people watching from Dubai, from Singapore, from India, from Europe. Let us know where you're watching from. Naomi is watching from the Upper West Side. Thank you, Naomi. And yes, it does sound like a wonderful show. In case folks missed it, our guest this week is Sheryl McCarthy. She's the host of City University of New York's one-to-one interview show, but she also was formerly at the Baltimore Evening Sun, ABC News, New York Newsday, and the New York Daily News. So we are looking forward to a great show today. And of course, our host is Sri Srinivasan. Sri, good morning. How are you today? That's 1 second, Sri. How are you today, Sri?
I'm doing well, Neil. Thanks as always for running this show and bringing us all together. We are super excited to talk to Sheryl in just a few minutes. And thank you to everyone who's watching around the world. Thank you for being here. Please tag your friends. They can watch live or watch later. And I see that Doug Levy says this is a normal time for him to wake up out in California, 5:30 in the morning. And thank you for being here.
Exactly. And we have Par Prem Kumar watching as well, and Nasir from New Jersey. Par is in the Hudson Valley. Our friend Jonathan Borstein, of course, is watching from the East Village. Linda Lawrence from Long Island, and Diane Stefani from Margate, New Jersey. It's so great to have such a loyal following and viewers that tune in every Sunday. It really is a great community that you've built up, Sri. So thank you for all the work. 5 years. This is the 6th year of the New York Times Read Along. It is just such a great show. And we wouldn't be able to do it without such great staff as well. What a production team that we have. Paula Kiger, Steve Taylor, Julia Weeks, Carla Baranauckas. One of the great things about our show is that we have people watching on Facebook and LinkedIn in particular. Paula Kiger will be dropping in links and answering your questions there. Steve Taylor does the same on LinkedIn as well. And Sri, we also have some sponsors. So if you can say a word about our work with MuckRack.
Always grateful to MuckRack. Please check out what they do at MuckRack.com. They are for journalists and for PR folks. Please check them out. We have done a lot of different projects with them, and we're very grateful for their support of the New York Times Read Along. If you'd like to be a sponsor, please email me and Neil. You can see our contacts right on the screen. We'd love to talk to you about sponsoring this show.
Absolutely. And this show is produced by this great team, and the team behind it, we all work together on Digimentors, which is a firm that Sri co-founded several years ago. Sri, could you tell us a little bit about the work that Digimentors does?
So we produce shows like you see here for other people. We also do conferences and summits, webinars, podcasts. If you would like to talk to us about any of these, please do get in touch. We do training, we do workshops. Please get in touch and check out digimentors.group, digimentors.group.
Thank you very much, Shri. And without further ado, what we want to do is we want to jump into the newspaper, take a look at the front sections to see what is on offer today. And then we'll bring in our guest, Sheryl McCarthy.
Yeah, we should start by telling everybody that my table looks sparse today because what happens in New York City and in some other places is that half the Sunday paper gets delivered on Saturday. So sections like the book review and the magazine and arts and leisure. But yesterday in a home cleanup, somehow those sections got tossed out. So I only have the sections that came in today, the Sunday paper that came in on Sunday. So we have less to display here, but there's a lot, of course, that's online, and we'll talk about that. But let's take a look at what's in the Sunday sections that I do have today. The Sunday Styles is Seth Rogen is all fired up. The affable schlub turned Hollywood player has spent the pandemic tweeting, streaming shows, and getting better at ceramics. And oh yeah, smoking weed, lots and lots of weed. Drag kings ready to reign. Once overlooked performers who explore manly tropes are building a fan base online. That's the style section. The business section cover is the robots are coming for Phil in accounting. Employee of the month. A college degree and specialized training don't guarantee protection from automation. And this is something obviously that many folks should be worried about and are worried about. And that's a piece by Kevin Roos. And all this time without our work friends, what the absence of office life has shown us about how we spent our days. And this is by Roxanne Gay. So lots of interesting things to look at here. And let's see the at-home section. Despite it all, we're still dreaming. We're helping our kids dig out of a homework hole. We're rediscovering the nerdy pleasures of Dungeons and Dragons. We're masking smarter to stay healthy. And when we're all covered up, we'll give spring a nudge with seed starting pots made from newspaper. So that's the home section. The Sunday Review cover is we need to put a name to this violence. The recent attacks on Asian Americans have unearthed the contradictions and questions beneath America's impoverished understanding of race. To solve the problem, we must first learn how to talk about it. By J. Caspian King is a terrific writer, and it's really outrageous what's been happening to our East Asian population in terms of attacks of all kinds. So we'll be looking into this section, and here's the front page of the New York Times on Sunday. The Senate approves $1.9 trillion in aid for ailing nation. Biden lifts up poor to jolt the recovery. Partisan vote after all-night session. What was amazing is not a single Republican voted for this. And this is, at a time when there's so much chaos in this country. That's what every Republican, by the way, including some who had said now the Republican Party is the party of the working people and working class. That's what they did. Preparing for bioterror, neglecting the virus threat. U.S. stockpiled affirms anthrax vaccines. So they prepared for bioterror, but not for what, of course, we ended up dealing with. Logjam at sea as virus roils global trade. This is at the Port of Los Angeles, one of the main arrival points for products manufactured in Asia. So there are, look at all those ships. I almost didn't notice them. Those are all ships waiting to be unloaded off the coast of LA. And two more stories to look at. Georgia bills target Black church voting drives. We know the role that voting drives played in the victory in Georgia and in other places. And so they're going after that. And Cuomo, shaken and isolated, feels his grip on New York's slip. We saw that Governor Cuomo, shaken by two different scandals, a scandal around nursing homes and the undercounting of people who died, and sexual harassment claims. But he said this week that he will not resign. So we'll see how long that'll hold. There was a big Washington Post story also overnight with more allegations. All right, with that, I think we're ready to say hello to Sheryl McCarthy, and we're excited to have her with us. Our guest is Sheryl McCarthy, the host of Cuny TV's One-to-One show and a former journalist with the Baltimore Evening Sun, ABC News, New York Newsday, and the New York Daily News. Welcome, Sheryl.
Good morning. Happy to be here. Although you guys got me up pretty early, I was trying to get them to read part of the paper, so.
You're not a super early Sunday person, is that right?
Not real early. No, not this early.
Okay, I understand. So I'm extra grateful to you for being with us. We always ask how our guests are and how have you and your family been handling the pandemic?
We've been doing fine. I fortunately, and I'm sort of amazed that nobody that I'm close to, either relative or friend, has come down, with COVID. And I think that's remarkable, and I'm feeling very grateful for that. I finally got my second shot the other day. My husband's had both of his shots. And one thing that really amazed me was the scramble that people had to go through to try to get the vaccine. And there were so many urban legends that rose up about, how you can get the vaccine. I had friends would tell me, well, you need to go down to the Javits Center at about 6 o'clock in the evening and beg, or go to this particular place at by 10 o'clock and you get on a waiting list. If you one of the first 5 on the waiting list, and if you go back at 6, you're sure to get a vaccine. And so I've been running around to all of these places, but I finally can say, I tell people I have been vaccinated. And so I'm very happy about that. And I'm feeling, it's like, I feel that we're coming out of this. We made it through and we're coming out of it. And now you can actually go to a restaurant and sit down and eat. I actually went to the health club for the first time in about a year. The movie theaters have opened, and I've got a free pass to the AMC theater. So, I think that by summer, things are going to be a lot better and back to a more normal state.
Well, I like that optimism, and that's important, obviously, for us to get through this. Jay Colon says, Sheryl, loved your articles over the years, so that's nice to see that. And Marilyn Zeifert's watching from Staten Island. I call her the queen of Staten Island. And Ellen's watching from New York City. Thank you all for being here. Please hit share so that your friends can watch. We're live on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And you can tag a friend so they can watch live or watch later. And so let's first get your a little bit of background for our audience. Tell us about your TV show and some of your other projects.
Yeah, I've been doing one-to-one for Cuny TV for, it's hard to believe it, 13 years now. After New York Newsday closed down its final presence in New York City, I think after about 13 years, and cast us all out into the street looking for jobs. I happened to run into Jay Hershenson, who's a former vice chancellor of the City University of New York, and I ran into him at a reception at the journalism school, and he said, well, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm looking for work. I'm looking for a job. And he said, well, come in to see me. And so I went in to see him, and we'd known each other really over the years, where I covered education for the Daily News for a number of years. And so he, and at Newsday, when I was writing my column, I wrote about education issues. So he said, come in. And he said, and he sort of made up a job on the spot, which was that I would go to Queens College, which was his alma mater, and I would teach a little bit. I would do some mentoring to students a little bit, and I would, host this TV show. Now, in the early years, all of my guests were women, and that was by fiat. The Cuny TV had a show, I guess starting in the 70s, running through the 80s, called Woman to Woman. which was hosted by, I think, the then head of the Cuny Graduate Center. And I think that when I came on, and she had retired, and when I came on, I think they wanted me to do a similar show, into the woman's point of view. I thought that by that time, doing an all-women show was passé, and I fought against it, but I didn't win. And so for the first 11 years of doing the show, all of my guests were women. What I think that people who watch Cuny TV are looking for are conversations with smart, thoughtful, accomplished people about issues that are important, about issues that are important and that are interesting. And basically, that's been the outline of the show. I try to find, first it was women, now women are men, who are accomplished in various areas, and to have conversations with them. And I figure that if what they're doing is interesting to me, then the subject will probably be interesting to the viewers. So we interview a whole lot of book authors on various subjects. Sometimes it's history books, sometimes it's women's issues, sometimes it's race issues, sometimes they are fiction books, or we interview people who have done scholarly work on various subjects, interview people who are in the arts, interview people who are public officials. I'm not big on politics because I think, the people who cover politics are really interested in the game of politics and really have to care about the game of politics. And I'm not interested in that. I don't know much about it, so I avoid that. I don't do a whole lot about science, although I interview people who are in the medical area because that's something that interests me. So it's just, we cast a really wide net of people, and which makes life very interesting.
Sure it does. And your example of how you ended up getting your job is also highlighted here by Laura, who says, a good example of how things can fall into place in a job search: show up, tell people you are looking, and of course do great work. And that's one of the things we've lost in this pandemic time, where you can't actually just go. These serendipitous gatherings are so rare, and that's something that's missing. For sure. Can you tell people how they can find Cuny TV and watch your archives, and also any special shows that are coming up?
At one point, I would have said, go and look at the New York Times TV listing, but because they listed, Cuny TV, but you can't do that anymore. Whether the Daily News lists Cuny TV, I'm not sure, but you can certainly go to the website. They're always promoting what's coming up on Cuny TV. So that's one thing you can do. And also, once you have found out about various shows, after the shows have aired, they are put onto the Cuny TV website. So you can watch all of my shows going back to 2007. You can just have a weekend where you just binge on one-to-one.
Can you tell us a couple of shows that you've done that you're super proud of, and then what's coming up that we should look for?
I've been proud of a lot of shows. Some of the shows that, when I think about things, shows that instantly come to mind, that were just fun to do, was a show that I did with Dr. Ruth Westheimer, and this was some years back. And the reason we did the show was because there was a play on Broadway based on Dr. Ruth's life. So we thought it was timely to have her on. And I just enjoyed her. She's about 4 feet, 10 inches tall, maybe less than that. But she was just so bubbly and fun, in addition to being smart and honest. She said that her grandmother, when she was a little girl, her grandmother told her, you should always be upbeat and happy, because people don't want to be around somebody who is depressed and glum. And she's continued to do that, and it has really worked well for her. And after the show, she was somebody I really wanted to put in my pocket and take home with me because she was so delightful. One of my favorite.
We're showing that on the screen, by the way, the link to that. So.
There she is. One of my favorite guests was Erica Jong, the novelist. I also learned that she's apparently a fabulous poet, though I've never read her poetry. But she was such a good guest because, I think she's sold about 50 million books. And so she's done a whole lot of television and radio, and she really knows how to do it. She knows how to dress for it. She has the personality for it. She knows how to answer questions in a pithy and colorful way. And so she made just a great guest. And I've had her on twice to talk about her books. One memorable show that I just always remember, and this was also from the early days, was an interview with Kathy Wilkerson. She was a member back in the 70s. She was a member of the Weather Underground, which was the radical group that was opposed to the Vietnam War, and they would do these radical actions. And at some point, she and members of the Weather Underground were practicing making a bomb, which they planned to plant in some kind of military installation, I believe, in New Jersey. Not to try to kill anybody. The plan was to plant it at night when nobody was there, but to make a protest against the war in Vietnam. Unfortunately, as they were working on this bomb, it blew up in a Greenwich Village brownstone. It killed several members of the organization. She escaped, but went underground for years in hiding. Eventually, she came back out. She turned herself into authorities. She went to prison, served her term, and then she wrote a book about her experience. And what impressed me about her, this was a stupid idea that they did, stupid thing that they did. But what impressed me was that here was somebody who believed in a cause so fervently that she was willing to basically risk screwing up the rest of her life for it. And I don't know many people who will do that. They will march in a demonstration and other protests. They will write letters. They will organize groups. But this was a real life changer for her. And so I respected her dedication to that particular cause. I've had all kinds of really great guests. I mentioned that Erica Jong was, among other things, a poet. If I think about some of the guests that I really wanted to get to know, not just to interview, but wanted to get to know, a lot of them were poets. People that I wanted to have coffee or want to have dinner with, they were poets. Esther Cohen, who teaches in the Cuny system and does a lot of things, teaching women to write and writes her own poetry, has become a good friend of mine. Honor Moore, she's the daughter of the former Bishop Paul Moore of the Episcopal Diocese of New York, and she's a poet. I wanted to get to know her. Mina Alexander, who taught at Cuny. Katha Pollitt, who is a writer on women's issues, but also writes poetry. These are all people that I wanted to get to. I don't know what it's about them, but the poets are the people that I seem to have been drawn to. And it's also interesting, like I said, in the early days of the show, it was all women. And I noticed I'm a baby boomer, and I went to Mount Holyoke, which is a women's college. And back at that time, this is before the Ivy League started, just before the Ivy League started accepting men, or a lot of the major universities didn't accept women. And so if you were a smart woman back there, you went to the best college you could get into, and that was often a women's college. And women's colleges always gave you the message that you could do anything you wanted to do. You were not limited by the fact that you are a woman, and you get out there and do it. And so many of the guests on my show have been graduates from women's colleges. And you almost can tell when they walk in because there's a certain spunkiness about them. There's a certain competence. They're smart, of course. And, so just a disproportionate number of the women who've been on the show have been women who went to women's colleges. I remember alumni back in the day, alumni at Mount Holyoke would be described as, somebody would be referring to somebody and they said, that gal did this, this politician, and she's a great gal. And these were gals. And I know what is meant by somebody being a gal, because I went to women's college and I've had a lot of them on my show.
Speaking of poets, there was the story about perhaps the most, the hottest poet right now, Amanda Gorman, and what happened over the weekend. Do you want to comment on that?
I don't know what happened. What happened over the weekend? I know about her.
There was a security guard in front of her own building, said that she was acting suspicious and she was stopped by a security guard. So that was a kind of surprise, but this is what happens to Black folks in this country, as we know, that you could be as famous as she has become in the last 2 months and be in front of your own building and be stopped as she was. Just really unacceptable in so many ways.
I would imagine she probably gave him a piece of her mind.
Yeah, and then she spoke out about it. I mean, as this happens to so many people, and they don't have an avenue to talk about this or just keep quiet. And that's one of the things that we have learned over this last year of racial reckoning. I think it's important that people speak up. Here's what happened. A security guard tailed me on my walk home tonight, she wrote on Twitter. He demanded if I live there because you look suspicious. I showed my keys and buzzed myself into my own building. He left, no apology. That is the reality of Black girls. One day you're called an icon, the next day a threat.
Right. Walking while Black, existing while Black. Yes.
Just so unacceptable. And I'm glad that Amanda was able to share it. And I'm glad we got a conversation about poetry so early on a Sunday. So what I'd like to do now is take a look at the paper and have you comment on the things that you see, if there's anything that you'd like to comment on. But first, just your thoughts, having worked in newspapers, what it is like to see all these newspapers arrayed out, these pages still there. What role do newspapers play in your life now?
Well, they played a huge role in my life. I've always read newspapers. I still get my news primarily from newspapers. It is sad, as you know, what has been happening to newspapers over the years, since so many of them have shut down, including, New York Newsday, where I worked very happily for 19 years. And you sort of wonder, it's interesting. Until very recently, I was teaching at Queens College. I was there for 13 years. And I would ask my students, where do you get your news from? And almost all of them said they get it from Facebook. Very few of them actually read. A few of them will read the New York Times on their smartphones. But I think because so many fewer people read newspapers nowadays, that there's a lot of information going around that they're getting, but they're not necessarily well informed, because they're getting their news from on social media, and a lot of it's opinion, and that's a sad thing. And so I think a lot of us who have been in the business for a long time are very much concerned about what the future of journalism is going to look like. We know that it's going more and more towards the internet, but how well informed are people going to be if they're getting most of their news from the internet?
And that's something we'd all be thinking about. Let's see some of the greetings coming in. Carrie Misford is here. She is an editor and design at the New York Times, and she's involved in a particular section that Neil's going to show us on screen, a print section on Carnival. And let's see if we can bring that up. Carnival in winter. There it is. Neil, you want to walk us through this?
Absolutely, Shri. So first of all, I want to show both the print edition, and it's a special section in print this week. A nice cover, a lot of nice two-page spreads. If you see the inside, the table of contents is even set up in terms of 4 main stories: Feathers and Female Power, Carnival's Journey to Notting Hill, Not So Fun Police at the Party, and Inside the Carnival Sound. Of course, Carnival had to be canceled this year because of the pandemic. But some just great photography. This page, Black Joy and Active Resistance. And obviously you can see I've got the paper crammed in a little corner here, so I apologize for that. But this is a Carnival, to me, is so important. It means that we are able to continue to celebrate the plight and sacrifices and the achievements of our ancestors. That's Allison Williams. This special section was led by Veronica Chambers, who was a guest on our show back in August, celebrating 100 years of women's suffrage. So that was a great show, and this is a great series of photographs in here as well. Carrie was involved in the design of this section. In addition to the print section, as we're just going to leaf through this real quick, you can see, hopefully with the lighting, you can still see the photographs in here.
Yeah, they look great. Yeah.
And then there's another, 2-page spread. There's so many intersections of us. We're not just Caribbean. We're not just Canadian. We're not just Black. We're also gay, trans, bi, pan, all of these different things. That's on the left-hand side. This is the Carnival's Journey to Notting Hill in London. But then there's also, now here, this I thought was really interesting. They actually took a 2-page spread and turned it vertically. So you have to see the full costume that this person has. So you see all the feathers coming out. And that's the headline, Carnival is reclaiming the streets. Is doing everything that you're not allowed to do. Carnival is joy, it's celebration. That's by Sam Alexander, director of the Brazilian band Bach de Ox from London. And the caption on this, on display, a moment in the West Indian American Day Parade in Brooklyn, 1990. If folks who are watching from New York at least have gone to the West Indian Day Parade, be interesting to hear their recollections. Or if anyone has been down to Carnival, or I said down, but anywhere for Carnival, that would be interesting to hear about. And then you see, and what's interesting with the layout, you have a series of black and white images, and then one color image on each page, and that really does stand out over here. And then again, another interesting 2-page spread. Carnival is like freedom. It's like liberating. You put on your costume and you go out on the road and you hear happy music and you're next to your friends. Again, the single color image on a little bit a wider view to show that. We'll just keep going. And this is it's a good detail, but what I want to do, Shri, is as we get to the end of the print section.
It's a really long print section. There's so many pages. My God.
It is. And the only ad is the house ad for The Morning, which is which is a newsletter by David Leonhardt. But what I want to do is to actually stop that, and we have Sheryl on the screen. Sheryl, thank you very much. What we want to do is also show the online version of Carnival, because I think that is really something special. So give me one moment to bring that up.
Sheryl, any thoughts on either the West Indian Day Parade or Carnival yourself?
Not really. That section looks very interesting. I didn't get a chance to read it this morning, but it looks like fun, and I will. It's been a long, long time since I went to the West Indian Day Parade. One of the reasons I was married to a Jamaican man at the time, so I had to go. It was a bit overwhelming, you know. It so crowded, perhaps a little dangerous, as you know, to get caught in that crowd. So, you know, no, I don't have any real thoughts on the West Indian Day Parade, except I know that a lot of people go and have a good time.
Sure.
The online version that I wanted to show, it went up a few weeks at the end of February. But if you just take a look at what they did with this, they certainly had a lot of fun with this section in terms of the different, the way they're highlighting the different articles, in terms of the graphics, a little bit of the.
And they've got some music also.
And they do have music as well. So let's take a look at that real quick. We'll pull that up. And so let's turn on the music. For the whole page, I'm assuming you can hear that, right? So we're just rocking out, you know, dancing to the beat a little bit. Written by Geneva Abdul, Charlie Brinkhurst Cuff, Sandra Garcia, Pierre Antoine Luis, Michael Denzel Smith, Ashley Southall, Shireen Taylor. Photographed by Geneva Aduyalm. I'm guessing on the pronunciation. My apologies. But again, Veronica Chambers and Carrie Mifsud did a lot of the lead work on this. But they have a QR code in the middle. More than what was, I think, definitely in the print section.
Can you show that QR code in case somebody wants to?
Yeah, absolutely. See if you can scan that. We'll see what. Oh, it looks like it's not coming through. Is that? There we go. So there's the QR code.
And Sheryl Carla says that your friend Barbara Garcia is watching from Manhattan and says hello.
Hey, Barbara.
Edited by Veronica Chambers, Dodai Stewart, Marcel Hopkins, and Adam Sternberg. And you see the rest of the credits here as well. Photo editing by Amanda Webster in particular. There's also an augmented reality experience. So music by Mad Professor. This is one of the more interesting interactive layouts I've seen for a New York Times project. So again, when you pair a really great special section in print and this kind of layout, I think it's really well done.
But when you talk about what the future of journalism is going to look like, I mean, I think you should look first at the New York Times because it has done such a great job of bringing in a lot of the features of the internet into the newspaper. I mean, there's I think you've got a whole huge video section. I hear that's where the jobs are these days, videos and and podcasts and interactive stuff. And during these 11, 12 months that we've been locked down, and where in a real sense, a lot of stuff that would normally be happening has not been happening. The Times has been able to go behind the scenes and create so much, copy so many stories about things that aren't happening the way they used to, but they're happening differently. And it looks like the paper has gotten fatter to me, during these pandemic months. It's been very creative, I think.
I agree. The creativity has been very, very good, and so much for us to kind of learn and see here. Let's keep going into the paper. I've turned to page A3. One of the things we learned from Stuart Elliott, who is a longtime advertising columnist at the New York Times, was that there's always a Tiffany's ad on A3 from 1917. And now here we are in 2021. Suddenly there isn't one. There was one last Sunday. And so we can only guess about why there isn't a an A3 ad for Tiffany after 100 plus years. And it might have something to do with their recent purchase and all of that. But it's just sometimes, when traditions change, it's striking. Of course, only people who really follow minutia like this would notice. Carrie says, thanks for the compliments, Neil. Hope you all enjoy the section. And Carrie, please say hi to Dode and everyone else at the team who put that together. Fantastic. And here is a section, the Inside the Times is about tapping into the vibe of Carnival and how that all came together. So that's pretty cool. They have here to help 3 cheap and helpful tech gadgets that they talk about. And here is the print ad from Facebook asking for regulations. This is something that they have done several times and just always amuses me to see that. Mutual aid groups frantically patch holes in the safety net. And that's such a big, important aspect of what's been happening with the virus. Feel free to jump in as you see a lot of these stories. How autumn surge overwhelmed the smallest state and what's happening in Rhode Island. And the virus tore through a densely populated area of vulnerable citizens. Great piece by Apurva Mandavilli. Divisive drug does not speed recovery, study says. So this is about a heartworm medicine that's been getting a lot of attention. And by the way, we should also point out that we heard this week from Bolsonaro, the president of Brazil, after 2 days of record deaths, he said people should stop whining and move on. And I've always felt he was like a twin or Trump Jr. and just really terrible person there. And look at this photo. Have courage. Dalai Lama takes his first vaccine shot. And this is at the COVID vaccine center in Dharamshala where he lives. As many folks know, he lives in India and has been in exile there for so many years. Let's keep going here. The San Diego Zoo Alliance. This tells you something about the state of where we are trying to raise money as nonprofits. The San Diego Zoo is advertising in the national New York Times. Hong Kong Dispatch, a retreat free of tourists if you ignore all the local ones. So this is on Lion Rock in Hong Kong. This is also an unusual story. Pope meets with Iraqi cleric in appeal for solidarity among faiths. Shared origins extolled in visit. And one of the things that was highlighted in all this reporting about the Pope's visit is that in a place where there used to be a lot of Jews, in this interfaith event, there were no Jews that they could find. There were only like 10 or 12 Jews left in the country or some number like that. And they were invited, but they did not come. Italian prosecutor seeks life sentences for 2 Americans and killing of officer. A scuffle over a stolen backpack in Rome quickly turned deadly. And here is a sad story about where being a journalist and a woman could cost you your life. And this is about Afghanistan and what's happening there. And just terrible to see, Sheryl, how journalists are being attacked all over the world.
Yeah. Sri, can we go back to one of the front page stories? And that's
Sure.
about the flack that Andrew Cuomo is getting over, 2 things. His handling of reporting the deaths, not reporting the deaths that occurred from COVID that occurred in nursing homes, but now over being charged with being a sexual harasser. I have read the reports, and in one case, this was the 25-year-old aide who felt that he was basically coming on to her in meetings in his office and elsewhere. I do think he was trying. I do think he was coming on to her, and that was improper because he's the governor and she's like a 25-year-old aide. The other two accusations, I am more skeptical of. The woman at the wedding who says he put his hand on her back and touched her both sides of her face with his hands. Maybe she was offended by that. I would not have been offended if somebody touched my lower back and put his hands on my face. In perhaps that incident, he said, "May I kiss you?" Sexual predators don't ask you if they can kiss you. They just sort of grab you and kiss you and grope you and maybe rape you. And so I feel that, women have the feelings that they have about what happened to them, and they're entitled to those. But it does not appear to me from what I've read that Andrew Cuomo, what he was doing, rose to the level of what Harvey Weinstein was doing, or what Matt Lauer was doing, or what Charlie Rose was doing. But these stories catch on, and all of Cuomo's enemies come to the fore. Women's activists get in the Me Too movement get exercised, and I think it gets blown out of proportion. I have not read anything about Cuomo's actions that make me feel that he was a real sexual predator, and certainly, or that he should be forced to resign.
Okay, thank you. And for those who are, especially our international audience, that might be wondering why we're diving so deep into this, it's partly because Cuomo was a star, international star, national and international star last year during the pandemic, especially in comparison to Donald Trump's handling of the virus, how he handled it here with his daily press conferences and things. And I know even my family in India were like talking about Andrew Cuomo. So that shows you the reach and power that he had. I think writing a book about leadership lessons during the pandemic while it's still on was a miscalculation, and somebody should have stopped him from doing that. Any thoughts on this story about Black churches and their voting drives?
Well, I was very interested. I think this is centered in Georgia, where, and I was very surprised to hear that people could vote on Sundays in Georgia, or at least maybe a few Sundays a month, which seemed very progressive thing to do. We can't do that here in New York. And now the Republicans are trying to stop that because too many Black people are going from church to the polls. You don't want to do things to keep people from voting. You want to encourage people to vote. And so anybody who is throwing up obstacles to keep people from voting, especially if they are Democrats and especially if they are Black people, is really doing a disservice to the whole country.
So thank you. And we hope that this doesn't affect the true ability for people to vote, but it will. And that's part of the problem. And that's what Republicans are doing nationally. Let's keep going here. And of course, feel free to jump in. One of our viewers has said that the New York Times should do a deep dive about India's falling COVID rates. I think it's an interesting story about how India has handled the crisis. And Rose says, why is it okay for a governor to ask a woman if she likes to have sex with older men? Yeah, he was, multiple women have now said that he would ask about their sex lives.
Well, that's over the top. That was improper. Certainly, if you're dealing with someone who is a subordinate, if you're dealing with somebody who's not, well, if men didn't come on to women, sometimes nothing would ever happen. But when you're doing it with a young subordinate, that's totally improper.
Director of lauded film faces a backlash in China. This is about the movie Nomadland, which has won Golden Globe for Best Director last week. Louvre recovers armor from a mysterious heist. After bloody war in Colombia, a chance to let the light in. And more about the black churches in elections. Democrats see Ohio as a way to pad majority moderate senators' retirement, and the split in the GOP may give a rival a chance. This is about the retirement of Rob Portman. I mean, he's what passes for moderate these days, but he was one of the people who didn't vote for this aid package. We'll just keep going here. New Orleans police officer accused of raping minor for nearly 4 months, calls, visits, and threatening jokes. Wary locals may hinder Amtrak bid to expand. This is about the Amtrak train system, and we know that President Biden is known as Amtrak Joe and kind of a big fan of Amtrak. And this is about what Pete Buttigieg, the transportation secretary, is looking to do, but routes have largely remained unchanged since 1971. As we all know, in Europe and other places, they really used the train system in such better ways than they have in America. How one firm dominated the U.S. stockpile. And here, one of the things we like to talk about on this show is the obit section, and I always like reading obits. Did you have to do advanced obits or write a lot of obits in your career?
Not for any of the newspapers. When I was working for ABC News, they stockpile obits. And I remember once Averell Harriman, the statesman, was old and ailing, and I was working out of the Atlanta Bureau at the time, and they asked me to go and interview Henry Kissinger, who had worked with Averell Harriman, and so I did. I interviewed him about Harriman, and I guess they used it in the obit. I remember one time, this was, I guess it was it was the Mankiewicz, who was the director of the movie Anthony and Cleopatra with Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor. I keep forgetting which Mankiewicz. There was Frank Mankiewicz. There were a number of Mankiewiczes. And I was doing weekend duty in New York and got called in. I heard that he had died. I was called in to do the obituary. And I really didn't know much about him. And the library there, ABC News had no library at the New York Bureau. The library was in Washington, and it was closed on Sunday. And so I was trying to get somebody to tell me what was something about this guy's history. And nobody could give me the information. So I go into a telephone interview with this guy, and I asked him some kind of stupid question like, what was your connection with Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton? And he said, "You have no idea what you're talking about." and he hung up on me, and I don't blame him, because I should have known, and you always want to go into interviews with some kind of background information, but I didn't have any, I couldn't get any, and so I wasn't able to do that particular obituary.
Thanks, Sheryl. I'm just showing a story here about David Brooks. This is the columnist at the New York Times who was taking money from various organizations that he was writing about, including he wrote a piece for Facebook. It's a little convoluted, but people would be interested in this. This also gives me, so he's resigned, not from the New York Times, but resigned from the Aspen Institute project that he was working on. But this also reminds me that the New York Times recently launched a report about its DEI efforts. And so there's some introspection at the New York Times about how to do diversity properly. And we hope to tackle that story in episodes to come in the future. Here is David Mintz, 89, whose tofuti made bean curd cool. He was known as the P.T. Barnum of tofu. He put tofu into ice cream type thing or ice cream substitute, and it became a big hit. And Priscilla Reed Chenoweth, 90, lawyer who won freedom for a stranger, is dead, fighting to prove a teenager was wrongly convicted of murder. And we saw just this week several, 3 New Yorkers who had been wrongly convicted being released, and that was a big story here. So that struggle to make sure that the innocent are freed continues.
Obits are really fun to read. To hear about a person's life story and their contributions. So they are really fun to read, and I think probably fun to write as well.
Yeah, I believe so. We love reading them. We had Amy Padnani on the show. You can find it in our archives. She was the obits editor who put together the Overlooked section about people of color and women who had been ignored by the New York Times in its 150-year history in the obit section.
Sorry, you didn't get a chance to read the arts and leisure section because you inadvertently threw it out, but I did read that section yesterday. And what you're seeing now after so many months is pages and pages of movie advertisements, because the theaters are open again as of Friday. So that was really fun to see. And I'm a movie nut, so I was really happy to see all of these advertisements for movies, and hopefully people will be going out to see the movies pretty soon.
That's good to know that those movie ads are there. That's great. Let's keep looking here. This is about signs are pointing to a sizable pandemic baby bust in the United States. There's been talk of, maybe there'd be extra babies with all these people locked down, but that doesn't seem to be happening. Where do the dead go in our imaginations? My friend is gone. I needed to do something to honor who she was. I think that's one of the things we have lost in the pandemic. So many people died who didn't get the proper farewells and the sense of closure that their families would have gotten. And beef is past its prime. The burger and I have a juicy past, but do we have a future? And this is Frank Bruni, who was longtime restaurant critic at the Times, in his op-ed. And Nick Kristof says, the U.S. isn't made for functioning human bodies. As Biden considers infrastructure, let's fix our scandalous lack of public bathrooms. And that's also something in other advanced countries. Public bathrooms are easy to access, but not in the U.S. Where is the outcry for us? This is about Asian Americans being attacked, East Asians especially, because of the way the president and others kept making the China connection and emphasizing that. And we've seen that here. For better or worse, an Asian American identity could emerge from this. And is this the end of French intellectual life? And more identity-focused discourse imported from the U.S. has taken hold. That is, not something you would expect to happen in France, where they take their intellectual life very seriously. So I look forward to reading that piece. And again, just feel free to jump in about any of the stories you see. America's privacy settings are wrong. This is the unsigned editorial in the Times. And there are letters here about an episode at a great women's college about what happened at Smith. And I don't know if you have any thoughts about that particular episode.
Tell me what happened. I think I remember.
So there was a black student who complained about being approached by a janitor about where she was eating in a closed or in a unused dining hall.
Yeah.
And immediately the president and others apologized, and this became another episode of where black people are harassed for no reason. And the janitor was a janitor who was not involved was suspended. So the whole thing was handled badly, it turned out. And this became a big story about our, just as we saw with Amanda Gorman, this is a real problem, but it was the response proportionate to what happened. And so lots of folks from Smith as alumni are writing in about this. And
you know what?
I think all the letters are about this one. All the letters in today's paper are about this one episode.
So many people get upset about, weigh in on very dramatically or angrily, get outraged about incidents that they did not witness, about writings that they have not read, about artwork that they have not seen, about movies and plays that they have not witnessed. And so, I wasn't there. I read about the incident, and apparently this woman was sitting in this area, and apparently it was a cafeteria that had been closed down to regular students and faculties because it was being used for some kind of, I don't know, summer camp or something for younger people. And that may have been the reason while the janitor said, "Why are you here?" Because they're not supposed to be any students here right now. And it may not have been. It may have been that the janitor, saw she was a Black woman and wanted to know why you're here. If you are not there, you only hear what people say about what happened, and people have their feelings about, what happens. And then they get passed on to other people who have their own version of what happened. And then it goes on the internet and it becomes a huge outcry. I can't say that the janitor at the school did something wrong. I'm just hearing all the blowback from it. But that happens more and more. And largely because, people are texting each thing, putting it on Facebook. But, a lot of incidents, sometimes there is a real offense that's done. Other times there's not. It's just a matter of this age that we're in, where all these versions of what happened, and the versions change from one person to the next person. And soon it becomes a huge brouhaha. So I really don't know if the college acted properly or improperly or whatever. I remember, I went to Mount Holyoke, which is not that far from Smith. And I remember when I may have been a sophomore, and there were very few Black people at the school at the time, nobody on the faculty or the administration. And I remember one of the students went for a walk one day in this very small town. She was off campus and she passed the house of somebody who had in the front yard remember those ceramic jockeys that people used to put in their front yard? And these jockeys were Black.
Yep.
And the student, this might have not have been a big deal if this had happened someplace else, but here you are, a Black student in this all white environment, and you're feeling like you're in an alien place, and you pass this. And she just went ballistic. I understand, felt how she would have felt. And she brought this back to the administrators at the college. And what could they do? This wasn't even on campus. I think they probably spoke to the people at the house and said, well, we have Black students now and they might be offended by this. Can't make them take it down. And what?
Sheryl, I'm sorry. I want to, just going back to that Smith story, I want to share what you were recounting. I was showing the article from the New York Times on the screen, which led with the initial incident, the initial interaction in the cafeteria. The article continues, saying that the Times, the Post, and CNN all picked up on the story but less attention was paid 3 months later when they looked at the investigation and found no evidence of bias. As you said, that she had they were determined she was eating in a deserted dorm that had been closed for the summer, and the janitor had been encouraged to notify security if he had seen any unauthorized people there. I think the reality, I mean, it's we're sitting here at the beginning of Women's History Month. Tomorrow's International Women's Day. You see the intersectionality, whether it's not just gender, but race, class, all these different factors come into play. In this incident, it seems like there wasn't anything there, but given the history of our country, given the way women are treated, we were talking about the Cuomo article earlier, looking at the way people of color are treated, whether it's African Americans, whether it's the Asian American violence right now. Would it be fair to say that people are, I mean, you mentioned that woman that saw the lawn jockeys, people are on edge, and things like this can get, there's usually something there. And unfortunately, sometimes when there's not there, it does get blown out of proportion, but it's just this time in history right now.
I agree. People are on edge, and white people are walking on pins and needles. They don't want to offend anybody, and you have a lot of among people of color and among women are determined to hold you to accountable when you act in racist or sexist ways. So it's a difficult time. And I just heard from Carla the other day about this case of Donald McNeil at the Times that I had not heard about before, who I guess went on one of the Time-sponsored tours to Peru, and he's has a group of, I guess, teenage girls, and they're asking him questions. They're having discussions about controversial subjects, and some of them about race and about other things. And they were very upset with his answers, and he's been forced to resign over them. One thing, and again, I didn't hear the conversations, so I can't say whether what he did was outrageous or not. But from his descriptions, I've read his descriptions of what the conversations were. There was nothing that was said that offended me. I thought he was trying to answer these questions thoughtfully. But you have two things at work. You have a group of teenage girls who teenagers tend to be sensitive about all kinds of things. And, if you say something that they disagree with, they think it's outrageous, they think it's sexist, they think it's racist. So you have, and then, once you said that and they start to react among themselves and they start to email each other, they start to send tweets, the parents get involved, it gets blown up on that level. So you have that happening. Then on the other hand, you have the politics at the Times, because I know that there are two things that the New York Times cares about more than anything else. One, about doing good journalism, and two, about protecting its reputation. So if you then have these people who are criticizing what a New York Times reporter did, and the criticism goes louder, and then more emails, and then more tweets, the Times has to step in and protect itself. And so the thing seemed to me blown out of proportion, but that's just my take on it.
Well, and Don McNeil wrote a four-part rejoinder to everything that happened.
Right.
So I'm sure people will be dissecting that. I read only one of his pieces. I didn't read the others. Let's keep going. Just looking here at the paper again. The Maureen Dowd column is Cuomo discovers Me Too means him too. And this is a story about Dr. Seuss and do liberals care if books disappear? Fox and conservatives are going after and complaining loudly about Dr. Seuss, the Mr. and Mrs. Potato Head and the Muppets controversy all together while so many other things are happening. I'll just say that in the case of the Dr. Seuss books, it's his own foundation that manages legacy that decided to take out the 6 books that they decided, 6 out of many dozen books. And whenever they talk about this on TV, they never show the racist images in question. They just say, cancel, cancel, cancel. And it's certainly a way to, drive anger about how things are changing. And you have Kevin McCarthy, the minority leader in the House, reading out Green Eggs and Ham as if people are coming for that book. And even if they are, that's not the biggest thing happening. But here's Ross Douthat talking about this as well. By the way, there was among the letters to the editor in the paper today about the Smith story. One is from a junior year student at Smith saying that the Times is trying to make the story about pitting class against race. And there's also a letter that says, whatever the merits of the class bias charges, the story paradoxically reveals class and likely sex bias on the part of the Times. Would it have run a story at all, let alone so prominently, at such length, and with such large photos, had the matter involved a not so prestigious men's or co-ed college, rather than, in its words, the elite 145-year-old liberal arts college with elegant wrought iron gates? And the writer is a former director of communications for Stanford. So I'm sure Terry has dealt with her own communications issues at the university level. All right, let's keep going here. We only have about 15 minutes left with Sheryl. We'd love to hear your thoughts, folks, as you're watching. Please tag your friends. Please share with your friends. They can watch this now or later. We keep hearing stories that robots are coming, but here the robots are coming for fill in accounting, and talking about how even college degrees will not save you from the robots that are going to come. Here is Verizon's letter to America's first responders. And this is about a white male Irish Catholic millionaire has made equity and inclusion a major focus of his position as a leader of a professional services firm with a buttoned-up brand. This is about Tim Ryan, the senior partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers. And so it's good to see when people are making that effort. Let's see what else is. Look at this. What you will need to live to be 100. Beyond your retirement funds, longevity planning should involve your life's purpose. Retirement planning is something that, of course, gets marketed to Americans a lot. And that's because the rest of our systems are so broken that they have to be marketed in that way. Let's look at the Sunday Styles section. This is there's a story here about Seth Rogen and a story about drag kings ready to reign. Once overlooked performers who explore manly tropes are building a fan base online. And I don't know how new that is, considering shows like RuPaul's Drag Race and others have been around for some time. A throwaway app that may be a keeper, Dispo, which mimics the disposable camera experience, is set to challenge Instagram. I have not seen this, but disposable photos certainly have an attraction for folks. Have you been following the Harry and Meghan interview with Oprah news and brouhaha?
I have been hearing about it. It hasn't aired. It's airing today, correct?
It's airing tonight. That's correct. And
right.
One thing that happened was overnight, a pair of folks who wanted to have some fun interviewed a bunch of 4 different observers, royal watchers as they're called, and interviewed them about the interview and said, pretend you've watched it already and give us your reactions. And all the reactions are anti-Meghan, even though they've not seen it yet.
Right.
And that calls out, how much anger there was and what the bias is among royal watchers against Meghan Markle. And this is the Modern Love column. We had the editor of the Modern Love column, Daniel Jones, on our show a couple of weeks ago. And let's read the tiny love stories here. These are the really small and easy to read by Melanie Pryor. Green ginger wine. It's time for green ginger wine. We would chant every Friday night as we danced around the kitchen. My lover's hand at my waist, my arm around his wife. We drank wine from goblets as their toddler yelled happily at our feet. It would be a long time before I admitted to myself that sex with him no longer felt right, that I was more in love with our life together than I was with my lover. When I broke up with him, I stayed friends with his wife and wondered if their child would remember me. That's a lot to pack into a small story. And that's one of the intriguing parts of the Modern Love column. And let's take a look at the social cues column. I will read one of these questions and would love to hear your answer, Sheryl. There's no right or wrong answer, so don't worry. But I will put you on the spot here.
Okay.
Young lady, really? I just turned 67 and feel pretty good about myself. I look like a healthy older woman. So why do men smirk when they open doors for me and say things like, here you go, young lady. That last time it happened, I felt horrible about myself for hours. How to respond, asks Nancy. We'll read Philip Galanza's answer, but if you have one, I'd love to hear it.
So she gets upset when they say, here you go, young lady? Really?
Yes. Yeah, she's 67 and doesn't like to be called young lady.
Well, she could be called a lot worse. I guess she feels that's patronizing. And some of my friends, we notice that people will call us dear, or, worst of all, ma'am. And I remember getting onto the bus one day, and a woman who looked to be about my age leapt up and gave me her seat, which I replied, do I I was not very gracious about it. I said, do I look like I need to sit down? I think people can be very patronizing to older women in particular. And I think that's what she was reacting to.
Yeah. Let's see here. Your encounters are so steeped in sexism and ageism that I doubt a snappy comeback will help you much. It's galling that these men feel entitled to comment on your age, but you shouldn't give male strangers the power to make you feel bad for yourself for hours. The next time this happens, be straightforward. You realize you're calling me old by calling me a young lady, right? I bet you don't do that to men. But your bigger takeaway, I hope, will be that the only person whose opinion about your appearance matters is you. I think that's a fair answer. And bringing the old brand back, Shane Oliver talks about what to expect when Hood by Air returns. Lots about fashion here, and this is more about Seth Rogen. And have you been to a online wedding or an online anything unusual this year?
I have not been to an online wedding. I mean, unfortunately, I've been to an online funeral, which was very nice. But online wedding, no.
Okay. And here is what it's like to work with a matchmaker. Several customers in the US and Canada share their experiences with the service. So this is something that's old that's coming back, right? And you're seeing that. Let's see. We'll look at Neil. Did you want to jump in and show us the digital versions of the magazine and anything else?
Sure, Shri. We can certainly do that. Let's go ahead and show the magazine from the website. So let's see if we can bring that up.
So for those of you who missed it, half the paper came in on Saturday and we threw it out by mistake. So that's why we don't have as many sections to look at as we normally do in print.
No worries. This is one of the things it's good about the Times is that we have different options. So let's go. Let me see if I can find the magazine real quick.
Sheryl, while we're waiting, Neil, maybe Sheryl can tell us about some of our upcoming episodes. We have about 10 minutes left with her, so let's get that in while you're looking.
Yeah. Well, I did an interview the other day with Amy Reinhardt. She's with an organization called First Draft, which helps journalists and regular citizens spot disinformation in news stories. I was really interested in, everybody talks so much. Everywhere you go, people are talking about fake news, fake news, fake news, fake news. And I was interested in what are you talking about when you talk about fake news? And is there really that much more of it now than there was 30 years ago? There's always been misinformation. And it's sort of like, it's something, Trump really invented the term. And, just because he says fake news, fake news, fake news about people who write bad things about him, does that mean that there's a lot of fake news out there? And so we're going to be talking with her about the phenomenon of fake news. It's interesting, when I ask my journalism students, do you believe fake news is a problem? And they say, all of them say yes. But if I ask them, can you give me an example of a bit of fake news, a fake news story that you were taken in by for more than 24 hours before it got corrected? Nobody can name an instance of where that happened. And it seems like when people are talking about fake news, they're saying the people who disagree with me politically, they're the people who are proliferating fake news, and they're the people who are taken in by it. But I'm not, because I'm too smart to be taken in by it. So that's a sort of interesting conversation that I had having with Amy about that. There's also having an interview with Glenn Lewis, who teaches he's at the Cuny Journalism School, who did a number of interviews with Joe Frazier back in the day. And it's his book about some interesting, I'm not really into boxing, but I learned a few things about how boxing matches get set up, and a few things about Joe Frazier that were kind of interesting. And so those are a couple of interviews that are going to be coming up soon.
Awesome. Looking forward to seeing them. And everybody just check out the CUNY 1-to-1 interview site, and you can see her archives.
CUNY TV, and look
CUNY
for
TV. I'm sorry, CUNY TV, going all the way back to 2007. So that's a great set of archives there.
So Sheree, we have the New York Times Magazine up. This is the print layout. You can see the cover story is a portal into a universe without COVID. It's a very touching picture of a young girl hugging her mom. We have the poem. We'll get back to the poem before we leave, because I know you like to read the poem. But here's from the ethicist Kwame Anthony Appiah. I have reason to distrust police testimony. Can I lie to get on a jury? And our bonus advice from Judge John Hodgman. What's interesting, Daniel Jones shared with us that the Tiny Love Stories is actually inspired by this piece. This kind of add-on, this advice from Judge Hodgman is kind of an add-on to the ethicist column, and he envisioned the Tiny Love Stories to be like an add-on to the to modern love. Here's a medical piece. They have these medical stories. Her eyelid drooped and she kept getting weaker. What was going on? A whole piece on head wraps and how to communicate with facial expressions. Improv night at the stove. Sam Sifton writing about cooking.
His recipes are always great, folks. You should check them out.
And written in marble. This is an interesting piece. Museum of Arts and Crafts in Hamburg, Germany examined the catalog for an upcoming auction. This is a looted marble panel from the museum in Germany. You also wanted to take a look at the book review, I think, right?
Sure.
So this is the cover story, Clara on the Sun, and this graphic is what dominates. You can just make it out on the left-hand side what the cover of the book review looks like, and you see the table of contents here. What's interesting, it doesn't have an easy link to the bestseller list in this online version. So that's just the way that content is shared and organized. As we're approaching 9:56, Shri, I'm going to turn back to the magazine and bring up the poem, Pale Colors in a Tall Field. Let's see if I can make that bigger for you.
Yeah, it looks small enough, short enough that we could read it. Well, actually, it's pretty long, so maybe we'll just read the beginning of it and direct people to find it online. By Carl Phillips. Remind me to show you where the horses finally got freed for good, not for the freedom of it or anything like beauty, though their running was for sure a loveliness. I'm thinking more how there's a kind of violence to re-entering unexpectedly a space we never meant to leave, but got torn away from so long ago it's more than half forgotten. Not that some things aren't maybe best forgotten, at a certain point at least. I've reached the point in my own life where there's so much I'd rather not remember that to be asked to do so can seem cruelty almost. Bad enough some days that there's memory at all, though that's not exactly it. It's more what gets remembered, how we don't get to choose. Again, I'm just going to pause there, but it's a longer poem and
right at the end, Shri.
Yeah, for example, okay, I'll read the rest. For example, if love used to mean rescue, now it's more gladiatorial, though in the end more clean. Who said that? Not the one whose face I've described somewhere as the sun. In that moment as the sun, at that moment when, as if half unwilling still to pull itself free from the night's shadow grove of losses, it first begins to appear. No, not that one, and not the one whose specialty was making a bad habit sound more excusable by calling it ritual, since when do names excuse? Wish around for it hard enough, and you can always find some deeper form of sadness where earlier, so at least you thought, mere sorrow lay. I've been arguing the difference between the soul being last out and the soul departing, so I still believe the soul apparently. That was long ago. Again, apologies for reading this live without any, which is what we like to do with the poem, but this one is the punctuation and the way it's laid out is especially challenging to read cold, but that was fun, and I hope people will look that up in the magazine. And with that, I want to thank Sheryl for her time today and just ask her for a couple of final thoughts, especially as you teach young journalists about the medium and about the craft and the career, the industry. What do you share with them about how to be optimistic in a ever-changing media landscape? Would love to hear your thoughts on that. Well,
we know that journalism has suffered a lot of devastating blows in the last 20, 30 years. So many newspapers, news outlets have shut down, cut back drastically as more and more people to get their information off of the internet. I encourage my students to continue to consult some of the mainstream journalism outlets, whether it's the New York Times or the Washington Post or whatever, which are still doing just really first-rate journalism, and where you're not going to have this problem of fake news, because they really verify the information that they are posting. As for people thinking about a career in journalism, well, it's gotten tougher, I think, as so many news outlets have closed. But journalism has always been a calling. You never went into it because you wanted to make a whole lot of money. You always went into it because it was something you were driven to do, like the ministry. And I think they're going to I certainly hope that they're going to continue to be young people who see it as a calling and go into it as a calling, and there are new jobs opening up in it, like we talked about video, multimedia kind of things. And I'm just hopeful that they're going to, and I see students who are still interested in it, and it's really important because we need journalists very much.
Thank you so much, Sheryl. We'll let you go and get back to your Sunday. We truly appreciate your time today. Our guest has been Sheryl. Thank you so much for your time and energy. We're truly grateful to you. We're going to thank our audience and do a little housekeeping here. So thanks very much, Sheryl. And
thank you. It's been fun.
Thank you. All right, Neil, let's thank our team. And also, we want to do a couple of shout outs here.
Absolutely. Thank you for Apollo for the kind comments, and Jonathan Borstein saying it was a great show as well. Chitachi, thank you very much, Laura. So in terms of our shout outs, again, we want to acknowledge our production team for the New York Times Read Along. We would not be able to do this without Paula Kiger, Steve Taylor, Julia Weeks, and Carla Baranauckas. You can follow them on Twitter at Big Green Pen, at Steve DeReeve, at Julia L. Weeks, and at Kabara. And speaking of Carla, Carla puts out the Local Connection. The Local Connection is put out by the Center for Cooperative Media at Montclair State University. They bring you the Local Connection newsletter every week, full of story ideas and pro tips for journalists. Best of all, it's free. So please subscribe at the please subscribe rather. You can subscribe at bit.ly/local news tips, bit.ly/local news tips. We also want to do a quick shout out to our sponsor, MuckRack, for the great work they do. Sheree?
And thanks to Greg Gallant, Mike Schneider, Lee Semmel, and others at MuckRack for their support. And everyone, please check out MuckRack.com. We also want to do a shout out to next week's show, and we have 2 more shows that we want to tell you about. That's coming up March 14th. Ralph Blumenthal will be here, New York Times reporter for several decades and the author of The Believer, Alien Encounters, Hard Science, and the Passion of John Mack. And then March 21st, Jason Duran will be with us, award-winning investigative journalist for the Associated Press and author of Kill Shot, A Shadow Industry, A Deadly Disease. So that's the next 2 Sundays, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. We'd love for you to tell your family and friends and join us. And you can check out all the archives on YouTube on my SreeNet channel. And we want to let you know that at 11 a.m. Eastern, our friends Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar and Marina Kurian, 2 surgeons, host She's on Call. And our producers are part of the team that put this together, Julia Weeks, Vandana Menon, Rose Horowitz. And they have 2 great guests for International Women's Day. Trailblazers in Medicine will be joining us. So please join the show at 11 a.m. Eastern on She's on Call on Twitter, on Facebook, and on YouTube. The show is also rebroadcast on WBAI 99.5 FM and worldwide on WBAI.org on Mondays from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time. So please check out those shows. And Neil, great job this week, and your wonderful team that puts all of this together. Very grateful.
Thank you, Sheree. And on a personal note, while you're helping to produce She's on Call, I just want to say I'm thrilled that Pam and I this morning, or right after the show, we're going to be leaving to go get our first vaccine here in Virginia. So we're very excited about that. I certainly want to encourage everyone. Hopefully no one is on the fence. No one is questioning whether or not they should get the vaccine. Go do it. Doesn't matter which one you get. Moderna, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson. If you can get it, get the shot, get the second shot if you need it. But remember to keep masking, keep double masking, keep physically distancing, not social distancing. We want to be close to people, but not physically close.
And Steve Taylor was the first one to tell me about that difference between physical distancing and social distancing way back at the beginning of the pandemic. And
absolutely.
Thanks, Steve, for that.
And we're working, hopefully, my mom will be able to come visit us in Virginia after we have the vaccine. You have to wait till the second vaccine and 2 weeks after the second shot to be fully immunized. But if we can all work together, and on an editorial note, I don't understand what's going on in Texas and several other states that are lifting restrictions and lifting the mask restrictions. We're not there yet, folks. So please keep masking. Please keep staying out of these large gatherings. We still have a long ways to go. There, one piece, Shri, before we forget, because it's powerful, and I think since we're talking about COVID, I do want to share this piece in the New York Times. 1 out of 3 people knows someone who has died of COVID, and this is just a powerful piece in the Times, and I actually want to share it with folks. So give me one moment to do that with the audio. And we'll put this on the screen real quick.
And before you play that, we can say goodbye, and then people can watch that, and you can end the show. So
absolutely.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
I'll scroll down and show it to folks. 1 in 3 Americans have lost someone to the coronavirus. And you can see the text rolling over the pictures. And I'm going to turn the sound on here. And we'll see. I'm not getting any sound yet, but I think it's still loading. There we go.
I lost my baby, my daughter Clarissa. It's still a nightmare.
And this will be
Clarissa
in the
was a happy girl.
Monday print edition. So
She
look for
loved
it
to dance,
in your Monday papers.
She loved to sing. And she was food.
That was that piece. One in 3 Americans know someone who lost. I know people who have died of COVID. I'm sure many of you have as well. Just a very powerful piece.
I met Ashley working as a CNA in one of the long-term care facilities here in Minot. We were helping change a resident, and this individual pooped, and I ended up catching it in my hands as there's no brief to go into, and that's how our friendship kind of took off. I have one older brother, so I set Eric and Ashley up. I just knew that they were going to be really good together, and they were. He was getting married to my best friend, and I got a big sister. I was very happy, cheesing ear to ear, crying. But her life was cut short. I wrote her obituary and picked out her outfit. She was buried in actually one of my sweaters, but that's not uncommon considering how often we traded clothes.
What's interesting is there's no pause button on this.
After Ashley died, my brother, he lost his life. It's like he's starting back over from square one, and he's just gotta keep moving forward.
Okay.
I was trying to be strong for him, but I still definitely have my moments where I just break down and cry. There's so many times I wish I could just call her and text her, and I can't. I look at that wedding dress and I just remember us, all of our good, happy times, and never in a million years I think I would be sitting here talking about my sister-in-law. I think it's safe to say to never take for granted the time you have with people.
There are 500,000 stories like that around the country. And I just wanted to take a moment and reflect on that and celebrate, what journalism is giving us and what the New York Times is giving us, both online and also in print. So if you do get a chance, take a look at tomorrow's paper. The layout, the way they present these stories, it's actually very special and it's a very unique approach. With that, I want to thank you for joining us for Shree's Sunday New York Times Read Along. We will be right here next Sunday. And if I'm not mistaken, next Sunday is the start of daylight savings time. Spring forward, you'll be turning your clocks forward at 2 a.m., but we'll be here nonetheless. 8:30 a.m. Eastern time. The time will be different for folks overseas. Thank you, and have a great weekend. Before I close, I see there are a bunch of comments that came in. I'm just going to review these before I sign off. Apollo saying congratulations on getting the appointment. Deborah from a fellow Vaxxed Virginian. And we'll close with Carrie's comment. Carrie missed it again with the New York Times story. So heartbreaking and powerful. Everyone should take time with it. I couldn't agree more. Thank you again. Bye-bye.